G'day folks, welcome to Stick With It, APA's podcast for its pilots. This is part 2 of a chat with Captain Andy Blair and First Officer Brad Page, who were involved in the Qantas QF520 flight back on November 8, 2024, which experienced an engine failure out of Sydney. If you've signed or joined in with this episode, which is part 2, we would recommend you go back and listen to part 1, where we cover the actual incident itself and how Andy and Brad managed that. This is now going to be a bit of a chat about what happened after they'd parked the brakes and the ensuing fallout from the actual event. So again, welcome back to Andy and Pagey.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
So you've just parked the brakes, and as you said before, we ended the other chat with a little bit of the adrenaline wobbly leg. What happened? As I'm assuming you've gone from air traffic control leaving you alone and the company leaving you alone, and you being able to manage the incident. I'm assuming at this point now, everyone wants a piece of you. So, normally you park the brakes, you talk to the engineer, you release the brakes, you tell him about any minor non-normal, ask for a windscreen clean and release the logbook. It's a little bit more complicated in this case. So Andy, to start with, can you give us a bit of insight as to what happens when you park the brakes after an engine failure and a safe return?
Okay, I guess because we've been told by the fire commander that we did have a fluid leak from that right-hand engine, it just meant that the urgency to get people off was a little more pronounced than the normal disembarkation. But we didn't feel the need to go into the alert phase again because the fire commander said it was safe to return to the gate. So I recall asking Brad to do the shutdown checklist to E-log, and I would obviously complete and send that after the event. And then I would go to the cabin, relay the information to our ground staff and cabin crew that we would be disembarking in an efficient manner due to the fluid leak, which they didn't specify it was fuel, but as it turns out, that's what it was. Yeah, you're right. It's definitely not your normal windscreen clean after landing or after shutdown. I left Brad up there. I think he was probably collecting data, information, ATISs and everything that had occurred post-incident. And then I went to the cabin when the forward door was open. CSM said that ground staff had initially wanted everyone to remain on board the aircraft because they didn't want them to have the press get to them. But obviously with my information, that changed. So I basically told the CSM and the ground staff that we would require everyone to get off in an efficient manner. So I made a PA at the forward door, just explaining that the aircraft was safe, but we would like everyone to disembark in a timely manner and that ground staff would assist with further information.
And just out of interest, was that, sorry, just to interrupt, out of interest, so they go for a dual doors disembarkation?
No, it was forward door only.
Right.
Forward door only with a full ship as far as I can recall.
Yeah. And out of interest, just with that, because you just said about, the media are already waiting for you because we now live in a world of Wi-Fi and social media. Even when you're making that PA to the passengers standing at the door, are people filming you?
I wasn't aware of it, but I think on the television broadcast that occurred, that was being done. Yeah, people were doing that.
Right. And in terms of, sorry, I interrupted you, were saying that the fire commander was then still liaising with you guys, or what was happening there?
Yeah, he was one of the first ones to board. So obviously there was a lot of congratulations from the first people to get off, but he came on very quickly. So we went to the side galley there at door right one, and people continued to disembark. He asked if there was any fumes during the engine failure event, and I reported no fumes, and it was fortuitous that because it was bleeds off, that was a contributing factor for why there weren't any fumes. Yeah, I got told by one of the passengers that he was from CASA and he would talk to me later, and I said, yeah, no problem. Someone else, I got told later there was Channel 9, ABC, there was colleagues that were friends of Brad's spouse on board, and so it was a very full airplane, but everyone was very grateful, congratulatory. I think at that stage I was still calming down, but I was happy to take their acknowledgements. And then I wanted a drink of water because I had a bit of a dry mouth, and our HR team had told me that I wasn't to drink too much because I was required to do a damp test next. So I just had a couple of sips and said goodbye to the passengers.
Okay, so hang on. So just clarifying that. So when the aircraft was met and the door opened, who was there to meet the aeroplane?
I think there was an airport manager, there was HR people from the base, and the fire commander was in the background. He didn't board straight away. I think I made the PA first. to let people know that the aircraft was safe, but we'd still like them to disembark in a timely manner, and ground staff would assist them.
Right. So,
Fire commander boarded. Yeah, fire commander came on board. I don't know, after first few people had disembarked.
Okay. And meanwhile, Brad, you're still on the flight deck. So, what were you doing at that point while Andy was sort of dealing with all this?
So we'd shut down done the engine shutdown checklist, then the shutdown checklist, and then engineer came on board, and he started pulling circuit breakers and getting the CVR information, like data recorder. And then I had another engineer get on the headset, and he said he's spoken to the fire commander. It's just a normal disembarkation now. So I think we relayed that to Andy at that stage, but Andy was already out, and I think by that stage half the people were probably already off board. And and then after that was just getting on the paperwork, filing it away.
And so the company wasn't trying to contact you on the company frequency?
No. So I think we had base. By the stage when I came out of the cockpit, there were 2 base support people there, essentially saying, don't drink too much water, we've got to do the damn test soon. And then Andy said, well, let's do our kind of cabin debrief on board, and then we'll go after that.
Right. So when all the passengers were off and it's time, Andy, for the operational debrief with the cabin crew, did you, is that the point where you basically politely asked everyone else to leave you guys alone so just the 6 of you could conduct the brief, or were people still wanting to sort of hang around?
I think the admin people were still in the area, but we just told them that we were going to do an operational debrief in the cabin first. We just did it in a business class cabin with the cabin crew. I pulled out the FAM and just used that as the template for a reference. The CSM had asked to contact their loved ones because she was aware that we were on the news by text message. But I think Brad and I were pretty keen just to do a debrief, just us first before talking to loved ones. And they were all good. Everyone got to have their feedback. At the time we were doing it, Brad and I were kind of just realizing that it just felt like a simulator. That whole event just felt like we were in the simulator. So, but from their point of view, obviously, they don't know exactly what's going on, but I thought they did great because they didn't interrupt us in our critical stages of flight and doing our non-normal checklists. CSM had great presence of mind to know where that pilot was, and she read back the minutes brief perfectly. I thought the cabin crew did a good job too.
Right. So from when you chocked the brakes and to when you walked off the aeroplane, how long did that take?
We still, so even after the operational debrief was completed, we still had one more task that I wanted to do, which was go out and inspect that engine before I made my e-log entry and then submitted it. So we actually got the HR ladies in yellow vests because they want to come down and have a look too, and we gave them a quick ramp brief. That stage there was several engineers and fire people still around, but Brad and I investigated. The front of the engine looked like there was nothing wrong with it, but obviously the back of the engine, there was multiple damaged turbine blades and there was a bit of a leak.
And Brad, what's it like to actually stare at the engine that has failed so dramatically on you?
It's pretty surreal, but I guess by that stage it was a good feeling. Like, we're back on the gate, everyone's off, everyone's safe. I think by that stage it's all right. We know the process we're going to go through. It'll be damn tests. There's going to be phone calls. We're going to be here for still a few more hours, getting stuff done before we head home.
So you then left the aeroplane. So I did laugh when I saw the photo, Andy, of you being papped through as you guys walked through the terminal. Where were you going to? Were you going back to the base ops offices, or where were you off to?
Yeah, we were. We're going to the base ops. So I reckon we're probably a good half hour before we left, because we did the e-log submission as well. And I joked to Brad that, okay, well, everyone's going to know it's us now. There's no anonymity in the e-log. We were being escorted by the 2 ground staff or base ops to the Sydney base. And then the person who recorded us walking through the terminal, they were just using a hand phone. There was no giant cameras or anything in our face. So, I didn't even really. I think he said, "We heard you did a good job." So I think I said thank you. But I didn't. We obviously no intention of talking to the press at that stage.
And how did you feel at that point? Were you sort of do you think you'd comprehended what had just happened? I'm still really fascinated as to at that point, is it sort of just again that sense of satisfaction that it's done well, or just how you're feeling at that point?
We're definitely going to have a couple of opinions here. I think for me, I was still thinking that the thing did occur like my sim training, and yeah, I felt really calm when I did the operational debrief with the cabin crew. That we felt like we were under control during the maneuver and during the management phase. But yeah, it was probably hit me later when I did the damp test first. I took captain privilege. I was busting, so I did the damp test first, and when I was washing my hands and Brad's doing his damp test, I looked in the mirror. Then you're trying to reflect and you're going, what speed did that engine quit at? Because I couldn't, time does slow down, as Brad mentioned it in part one. So I had that little doubt. But Tobiano actually rang us after Brad finished his our chief pilot, and he already knew that it occurred V1-2, so within a second of V1. So he was very congratulatory, and that kind of took my second guessing away from me. But I did. You do second guess yourself. That's the nature of our industry. And,
so basically, you were paranoid that effectively you were thinking that maybe you should have said stop.
Yeah, I'll say because I couldn't tell you if the engine had failed at V1-10 or all I know is that when I recognised an engine failure, I was already through V1 and there wasn't much runway left. So I was happy that the decision I made was correct, but we didn't have the data in front of us. We didn't. Yeah, it's hard. Everything does slow down in that little moment.
And I'll come back to that in a minute because it's just interesting that the recollection and obviously when you write stuff down. But again, the same point walking through the terminal for you, Brad, is it, again, how were you feeling?
Yeah, look, we got off at gate 8 to walk down to the base, which is a fair distance. Yep. And I think, those two reporters followed us pretty much to a beam, Hungry Jack's, and just kind of kept circling around. And obviously, Andy was saying, sorry, we can't say anything. And also the base people were saying that. But, by the time we got down there, it's like, oh, guys, you're going to stop. Like, this is getting a bit out of hand now. So I think, I just had my head down. I wasn't really acknowledging what they were saying or doing. It's just like, I just want to get in the base and get this done.
Yeah. And how long does it take? Because I've heard, damp testing can take a long time or a short time depending on, how close those people are. So how long, given you said you were busting, I'm guessing you had to wait a little while?
It was pretty quick, actually. I think the lady was there within a few minutes. I can't remember having to wait very long, so maybe 10 minutes or something like that. They were actually there pretty efficiently. She had to be set up first, so it took a little while for her to set up. And then you go through questionnaires. Yeah, I've been damp tested before as well. It's it just is what it is. It's part of the protocol, so not that big a deal. But fortunately, she was there efficiently, so I didn't have to bust for too long.
Good. And when that's all done, and so that's the one thing that needs to be got out the way. What happens then in terms of because obviously you guys in theory should have been halfway to Brisbane by now. So were you put up in a hotel for the night, or were you paxed home a bit later on that day? What did they do?
So essentially, they found a room for us for the cabin crew and ourselves. So after we had the phone call with Dick, we just all hung out in there and more discussion and kind of more informal debrief, and then we'll liaison with base how we're going to get home, and we're going to pack you back on this flight and how we're going to do that, etc. But we were offered hotel rooms if we wanted that. But I think being a Friday afternoon, everyone just wanted to get home.
And were people people coming into the base wanting to talk to you, or were they sort of leaving you alone just as a group, or what was happening at that point?
We were pretty much given an isolated room. So there was a couple of times where Brad and I went to a quiet room, just the two of us, to basically take down details for what would become the intellects report. I joked that I had to tick yes to almost everything. But obviously we were going to have to relive it for a paperwork point of view. But as Brad said, we were given a room which was pretty much just our cabin crew, us, and a couple of the admin team from the Sydney base ops. So there was no one really prying. I didn't feel intimidated at all. And we were given, I think, like our base manager from Brisbane had called us as well, Brendan Mead, to check on our welfare. And as Brad said, offer us whatever we wanted, really. And getting that phone call from the chief pilot and him having access to data that we, I was second guessing it, obviously, as you do after a major event. Just to have us, it was very reassuring to get that call. So, and Brad and I took that call on a speaker call in a quiet room, just ourselves, and it was nice to get acknowledgement from him so quickly.
And and as you said, it was a good idea to start putting stuff on paper as quickly as possible. Did you find was your recollection strong at that point, or did you find your memory was there already holes in it because of the adrenaline or just the excitement? I'm just curious how well you would have recalled what had happened within an hour and a half of that time.
I'll answer briefly, but I think, there were definitely holes. And so you're very much, you've got two different perspectives. You've got a pilot who's just concentrating on pilot flying and flying the required track and speed. And then you've got the other pilot who's analysing the instruments and carrying out that checklist work. So I think, it was two separate perspectives. I didn't know exactly what the gauges were reading, whereas Brad would have probably more attention to that. And so that was the sort of exchange of information that we were giving each other when we were preparing the intellects report, from my point of view.
So, Brad, it was obviously useful, the two of you working together to compile that report?
Yeah, like we ran a few things off each other. But then I'd have to say, the phone was going off the chart. Everyone's trying to speak to you. It's like, text message to the missus. Yeah, we're on the ground, we're safe. I'll be home late. And Andy did that intellects. I had a read of that. I thought it was good. Sent that off. And then we really didn't, talk too much about it after then until the kind of whole interview process started with the quantum safety and the ATSB.
Right. So you paxed home that evening, I'm assuming, Andy?
We did, yes. I also sent a text message to my wife. I simply said, little engine problem in Sydney, I'll be home late. She went to pick up the kids. Another Qantas pilot was there at school pickup. And she had no idea that it was on TV. And he asked, where's Andy? She said, he's down in Sydney. She said, he wasn't the engine fellow, was he? And she went, oh, yeah, he was. But yeah, I didn't want to stress her out. So
master of the understatement.
It was a little engine problem and I'll be home late. And then I rang. Actually, I think it wasn't until I got home that I gave her the full story.
Right. So you waited till you both got home. So you paxed home. Did you allow yourself to have a beer on the pax home, boys?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think I had to drive. Did we, Brad? I can't remember.
Well, I did think about it. I was super keen. But for me, it was more, and we had a lot of passengers that had been moved off our flight. Like I recognised a few faces that were on our flight, moved to the next flight. And I just thought, you know what, just probably best, it was obvious we were the two pilots on that incident. So let's just lay low. And I think we had a soft drink, but I did crack one as soon as I got home.
It tastes good.
I think too, at that stage too, I think we were still like taking notes on what had occurred, what sequence of events had occurred, from the memory item to the non-normal checklist to the supplementary. And we were just working through that. So we weren't really done, if that makes sense. When I got home, Brad, I had lots of text messages and calls of support, which was good. Even the kids got to the point where they texted me, well done, Dad. And then that's when I thought, okay, well, it's time to turn the phone off. So I did. I cracked a beer. I watched an ice hockey game. I'm from Canada originally, and I just switched off. I didn't watch any news. Yeah, I slept pretty good until about 3 a.m., which is probably the time I had to get up for that duty because it was a 4 a.m. sign-on. And then I was reliving it again. I'd forgotten that we got an inbound message in the cruise and we had center tank fuel. And so, yeah.
Right. So it obviously just your brain struggled to turn off whilst you were paxing home and driving home after the incident.
Yeah.
How about you?
It took a day or two, I think. How'd
you sleep, Brad?
My son just finished grade 12 that afternoon, actually. So we had a kind of dinner organised to celebrate that. And then so I came home, had that sneaky beer, and then we went out for dinner. And it was kind of a weird experience, you're at dinner celebrating his night, but you're just thinking, oh my God, what we just went through. But no, it was a good night. But I would say that my sleep for probably the next 4 nights wasn't the best. Like, I wouldn't say PTSD or anything, but just, I couldn't turn the brain off. It was just like constantly kind of thinking about it, what I could have done better. I guess you go into that kind of post-event, like a sim or whatever, where you go, did I stuff anything up? What could I have done better? What could I learn from it?
But it sounds like you're both satisfied that you did a good job because, nothing's perfect. So it feels like that you both are happy with what you did.
Definitely now. I think the next day I was a little bit kind of, for instance, even that kind of positive rate call, I was like, oh, did I miss it? Oh, that's so bad. Like, but as you said, nothing's perfect. And Andy picked it up straight away, and that's, That's what teamwork's about.
And we haven't seen the CVR or got access to it either. So he may have felt positive rate as well. We just, it's what you remember and what actually occurred. We've seen the flight data recording of the event, so we know our track and our flight path. But we haven't been given access to the CVR. I've asked ATSB, but they said for legal reasons that's not permitted. So basically, we're kind of going on our own memories, and human beings aren't the best witnesses.
So how long do you get to, I guess, replay things a million times in your head, but do you also then get a bit of a break from flying? What's the process? Well, in your case, what was the process for getting back in the air? Andy, you can start.
Every day from the point of the engine failure, we were thinking about it because we had forms to fill out with ATSB, and it wasn't just like how many hours you've done last 30, it was 90, and how was your fatigue reports, how was your sleep the night before. There seemed to be every day there was something admin related. The first interviews we were required to do was with Qantas Flight Safety, and Brad and I did that together on a Zoom call like this. And then I think maybe the next day or a couple of days later, we did the ATSB interview as well. I took APA representation with me. Brad took a very experienced TRE in Brisbane who's well liked. And that process, it's intimidating because they have the data and you don't. And you're basically just going off your memory. But from my point of view, I thought we got treated pretty well, but it's an intimidating time. And I remember there was some high up in Qantas, and I apologise to who that was, but I won't say their name, wanted us to do something else on Thursday. And I said, we've done every day, we've done something for a week. Can Brad and I just have a day off? We go play golf. So on the Thursday, we were given a day off with no admin required. But basically during the stand down period, there's a lot of admin still.
How did you find all that, Brad?
I'd actually been through kind of one of these investigations before, so I kind of knew what I was in for. And again, with the representation, I had this guy, send me a text message, "Oh, good job, Pagey." And then I kind of said, "Oh, well, I've got you, you've got so much experience on the airplane. Would you mind being my support person?" Which he agreed to straight away. So at no stage did I feel that, we were going to get grilled too much, because it was like a good outcome. Everyone walked away. So I was happy just to have that friend, help me out. But that whole process, I wouldn't say it's an interrogation, but probably more so because we had a good outcome. So, it went for a while.
So you said you went to go and play golf on the Thursday. So it happened on the Sunday. So when was, I guess, Andy, did the paperwork sort of stop, and then the getting you guys back flying again occurred? Did you go back in the sim, or was that not required? What's the process from your experience?
Yeah, no, it wasn't required. They do a just culture review after the safety interviews carried out and after ATSB interviews carried out. I think the event happened on a Friday. I think the ATSB interview was on the following Friday, from memory, but I might be wrong on that date. And then it was the following Monday, so like a week and a half later, that the just culture review was discussed. And I think that might have been the first time that Brad and I were allowed to see the flight data recording. So they played back the critical moments of the engine failure on the takeoff roll. ATSB had already confirmed too that they have time lapse. So the first indication of an N1 drop was at V1 -2. So very, it's within 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't necessarily the bang either. That was just the first indication the engine was about to let go. So that was very, it was good to see that, because when the interview process occurs, you're not allowed to see that, but we still had access to like flight data, flight radar, that sort of stuff. So we knew roughly what we'd done. And it wasn't long after the just culture, I think. So I think we were stood down for about 10 days, and they said take as long as you need. For me personally, I wanted to go back and fly again, and I think Brad was the same. So I think it was about 10 days total we were stood down, and then then we were returned to the line without a simulator required. It was, as Brad said, it was a good result. They were happy with their actions, and there was nothing punitive about it. So
and I'm assuming you both didn't go flying together when you both returned to work. So
I haven't flown with Brad since.
Right. And I know that Brad's headed off to the 787 because he wants to go somewhere where he doesn't have to push the rudder by the sounds of it. But in terms of you then flying, so individually you both went back to work, how was the first sector?
Well, for me, it was different. Like, I wanted to get back in the air and kind of get the monkey off the back. But that first kind of takeoff, someone else has kind of used this phraseology, but, hyper vigilant. I find now with every takeoff, I'm concentrating a lot more, which is a good thing. Critical engine, what the wing's doing, at the parameters. I'm definitely looking at it a lot more, more focused on, what's happening. So that's a good result for me.
For me, it was a wet day out of Brisbane. It felt good to be put back online. I just wanted to go back and fly again and not be talking about the scenario. And then, of course, in the crew room, everybody was offering congratulations again because they already knew. So that was kind of nice. But the very first departure, I actually did delay the rotate fractionally because there were birds crossing the runway, and I thought, I can't do this 2 in a row. But yeah, as far as I didn't actually, it felt good to be flying again, but I couldn't believe that there was birds near where I was going to rotate. I thought, surely, oh no, am I jinxed?
So you're the shit magnet, are you?
Yeah, but fortunately that was the one-off, and the rest of the day went pretty smoothly, and yeah, it did feel good. I think, like Brad, we're all aware that 80 knots to V1 is that go-minded nature, but you definitely do want to stop for if the engine's going to quit, because the performance of the aircraft is not going to be as good. So I think Brad and I have seen the airplane perform in its most critical performance phase, and I guess it can give you confidence that the numbers work and it does fly. But and it flies better than the sim, I would say too. It's not as twitchy as the sim, but yeah, you are more aware. I think for me, it's probably given me confidence that the training's really good, and I think that's the main thing I want to convey is that during the whole flight from takeoff to landing was 30 minutes in the air with the engine out. Most of it just felt exactly like what we do in a sim. So yeah, credit to our sim instructors.
No, that's a really good message. And have you taken off on 3-4 right again?
I have, yes. The grass had grown back, I think, by the time I'd launched. It wasn't long after, actually. Yeah, but we did see that we'd done a little bit of landscaping.
Right. And I guess, as you said, you clearly both of you have replayed this thousands of times in your head. In a non-judgmental way, is there anything, and this is, not the Monday morning quarterback, but is there anything that you would do differently, or what do you know now that you wish maybe you'd known before you'd push the toga switches on that day?
Yeah, from my point of view, it's a little bit comical, but I did say when we had to go bleeds off, let's just go 3-4 left. But there was nothing in the tech log to insinuate that was going to happen, and the airplane should be able to perform that with a bleeds off takeoff. If you're at Hamilton Island, you need to do it anyway. So we heard actually on clearance delivery that Virgin was requesting 3-4 left as well, and we knew it was busy Friday afternoon. 3-4 right, Brad said, look, the numbers say we can do it. So yeah, it was probably going to save us time. Knowing what happens, I'm happy to take 3-4 left maybe next time.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I agree with Andy. I think the training, puts us in good stead for events like that. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else really that we could have done better or worse. It's just how it played out, and it was a good result. Yeah,
well, it sounds like I think you guys did a fantastic job, and you should be incredibly proud of what you did. I'm assuming you both now get a golden ticket in the sim for V1 cuts. Has that been advised yet, or what's going on there?
I actually felt sheepish with my sim instructor. I felt like prepared to be underwhelmed. but for me, it was like only 4 weeks after the event that I was back doing my cyclic again, and I know I nailed V2 in the sim the second time, because I think I wasn't absolutely nailing V2 on the day, and I put the autopilot in earlier. So old school training was get the airplane clean. Because it was bumpy on the day in Sydney. No regrets about hand flying it, because the airplane does have to be perfectly in trim if you put the autopilot in. But yeah, I just put the autopilot in earlier during the sim exercise as well, and just to reinforce to me that can be done, and it probably allows for management a little less focused on flight instrument parameters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, no, look, I really appreciate your time, gents. I think this insight's awesome, just to give everyone a bit of an idea of, what happens in the event, but also just it's not as simple as we think. As I said, it's not just stop the sim and move on to the next thing in real life. So much. Thank you very much for the insight into that. I wish you, Brad, all the best with your 787 conversion. I'm sure it'll go really, really well.
Thanks, Mark.
And Andy, again, just continue flying the line. But to both of you, thank you very much for joining us. I'd also like to say thank you to Qantas for allowing Brad and Andy to join me. I think that sessions like this and this sort of information is incredibly valuable to the pilot cohort. So to allow us to be able to have this chat and to share it with the wider pilot group, I think all it does is make us a safer airline. So I think it's a really strong initiative. So thank you for that. We'll be back with another podcast soon. In the meantime, fly safe and stick with it.